Dare to enter Crow's Quill's books, where tales of forgotten realms and fearless souls come alive. Today's journey, Plato Wyngard and the Valley of the Immortals, Chapter 39 to 42, by Mark and James Lindsay. Will you uncover the truth hidden in the shadows? Chapter 39. Luther was a trained professional, but the stress, time constraints, and the scrutiny under which he had to prime his surprise made his calculations out by a second and a half. As the small package flew through the air, the explosive that was concealed within detonated roughly halfway between Luther and Thun. If the explosive had gone off as planned in the grasp of the elderly X, it would have blown him and his two lieutenants apart. But instead, the concussive blast knocked the surprised trio into the surrounding vegetation. One of their guards was killed by a stray shot fired in the back from a startled comrade. The second the package had left his hand, Luther had started to turn and run. Moments later, he was being lifted and thrown into the air. He hit the ground and rolled with the momentum. His ears ringing, vision swimming, he raced towards his pack. Plato, who had been watching and waiting, raised his assault rifle, and along with Nhat and Huin, opened fire on the unprepared soldiers. Quick reflexes and pinpoint accuracy enabled them to take out a large number of soldiers and provide covering fire for Luther as he dashed into the temple. The rock walls around him were peppered with fire as he dived through the entrance. Luther slid to a halt with his bag in hand. "Glad to see you make it a little early on the throw?" Plato yelled with a grin as he returned fire. "Next time, you get the bag's quarterback," Luther yelled back as he crawled towards his heavy machine gun. With a crazy grin, he cocked the handle and swung the extended link of rounds around his free hand. He took up a position on one side of the door and fired in one long burst. Advancing soldiers who did not have the benefit of cover were ripped apart by the heavy caliber rounds. "Damn, that feels good," Luther cried out jubilantly. The Viper was the first to his feet as he watched their hostage disappear into the temple. Groggily getting to his feet, he looked around in rage as his men were being cut to pieces by automatic rounds. "God damn it! Return the fire! Return the fire!" the Viper screamed. The Wraith moved protectively in front of Thun as the forest around them turned into chaos. Luther and Nhat continued to shoot from the temple doorway, with Huin standing in when they needed to reload. Plato had turned his attention to the ceiling. "What are you looking at?" Bion asked. "As much as we're holding our own for the moment, we can't do it indefinitely from that doorway," Plato said. Bion stared hard as well. "There's space between the eaves and the soffit," Bion said. "And that means what?" Plato asked. "It means that there's an opening between the underside of the roof and the wall," Bion said. "How do you know that?" Plato asked. "Because I've lived my life in a small village, and we're used to doing things for ourselves," Bion smirked. "This is perfect. Pass me the bag over there," Plato said as he continued to study the ceiling. Bion handed over Luther's backpack, and Plato withdrew a length of rope with a grappling hook. "They're starting to regroup," Luther called out. "Wonderful. I'm going to get up on the roof and see if I can start to take back some initiative," Plato called back. "Well, you better hurry. It looks like they're moving around behind the temple," Huin said. Plato nodded as he tossed the grappling hook up into the rafters. "Hold them back. I'll see if I can even the playing field," Plato said, slinging his rifle, then scaling the rope towards the roof. "You heard the man? Let's make it hard for these bastards," Luther said as he opened fire on an advancing assault. "Take the temple," Thun ordered. "We're trying, sir, but they have superior cover," the Viper replied. "Rubbish. Secure the rear and send in explosives. Give them a taste of their own medicine. Tun fired back. He's right. We'll make our own way in. I'm on it, the Wraith said, and took off to carry out her orders. Once up on the rafters, Plato was able to crawl through a small space between the wall and the roof and out onto a thin ledge. From there, he was able to scramble out onto the flat rooftop. Keeping a low profile, Plato crawled to the rear of the roof. From his vantage point, he spied 6 men moving through the thick vegetation, working their way around to the rear of the temple. Their movements were smooth and swift. "Ah, the Wraith's vanguard. I've heard about you," Plato whispered. During the war, rumors abounded that an elite unit under the Wraith's control had been formed, in response to the use of special forces teams in Vietnam. Experienced and exceptional soldiers, they were handpicked for their brutality and unparalleled hatred of U.S. forces. Plato had heard stories from Luther about the dirty tactics they employed and what they did with captured POWs. Suffice to say, they weren't the sort. Plato wanted to be fighting within the tight confines of the temple. "Well, let's see what they're made of," Plato muttered as he took up a sight picture. The vanguard's lead scout was covering the movements of his team, crouched behind a mossy stump. He was totally unaware of the crosshairs intersecting on the bridge of his forehead. Bang! The round's entry into the soldier's skull threw him back 2 feet. By the time he was hitting the ground, his comrades had scattered into the greenery. "Sneaky buggers," Plato whispered. He'd only fired 1 shot, and by the fact that he'd barely been able to climb up, he assumed that they wouldn't expect him to be positioned on the roof. He guessed he probably had 2 more shots before they were able to see his muzzle flash. Better make them count, Plato thought. Luther had just managed to repel another assault when his gun jammed. The glowing of the barrel from overuse suggested a round was jammed inside. "Hunh! Keep their heads down," Luther barked. The pirate didn't need to be told twice. He opened up with his pump-action shotgun, its drum-shaped magazine enabling him to fire repeatedly for up to 50 shots. Their tactic of rotating shooters had been successful so far, but they weren't prepared for the inclusion of heavy armament. The Viper had managed to maneuver a rocket-propelled grenade launcher within striking distance of the temple. Since the initial meeting of Plato and Luther at the warehouse, the Viper's ordered world as well as reputation had been thrown into disarray. Now in the presence of General Tun, he would show the old man who the worthy successor was. A 3-man team took up a position 100 out and awaited the Viper's fire control orders. Hoyne could see what was happening, but the RPG team were out of his range. "Nat, I can't reach them from this distance," Hoyne yelled out. "I'm on it," Nat replied. It took him a few seconds to locate the threat. Lining up the team's number 1 in the iron sights of his M16, he squeezed and fired. The round hit the young man in the throat at the exact moment he squeezed the trigger, throwing the launcher off by a fraction. The rocket thundered towards the temple. "Incoming!" Nat S dived for cover. The rocket's initial intended target had been the temple doorway, but Nat's well-timed shot had been enough to change that trajectory. Instead, the rocket collided with the heavy rock surface of the temple wall, not enough to penetrate, but the resulting explosion was enough to send shrapnel flying within the room. Plato had managed to eliminate 2 more vanguard troops when the RPG's explosion rocked the foundation of the temple and shook the roof where he lay concealed. Knocked from his position, he rolled towards the edge. The remaining 3 vanguard watched the resulting explosion and moved quickly forward, preparing to take advantage of the situation. Plato slid toward the edge, frantically trying to slow down. He let go of his rifle as he struggled for purchase. His rifle dropped from view and clattered onto the ground below. It was only by chance that Plato's foot was snagged on an imperfection of the roof, and he came to an abrupt halt. Now, clinging to the edge, he watched helplessly as the remaining vanguard moved toward the outer wall and placed a steel box against it. Plato lay upside down with the top of his head protruding from the edge. Still shaken from the explosion, he was confused about the nature of the box. It was only when he saw the vanguard retreating that he realized with horror its purpose. Before he could do anything, the box exploded and Plato toppled from the roof. Having only just recovered from the RPG explosion, Luther and the others were unprepared for the second one that tore a hole through the rear wall, the immediate aftershock knocking them all from their feet. Luther lay on his side trying valiantly to stand. As smoke billowed forth through the room, he looked around for his machine gun, but instead saw only the incoming rush of soldiers. The Viper entered the temple, accompanied by a small detachment of guards. Quickly assessing the scene for immediate threats, he noted that the three men were unconscious, but the female was awake, albeit knocked flat on her back. Right then, he decided to handle the young village woman. Grasping Bian by the hair, he pulled her roughly to her feet. "So, you're the one chosen who has the ability to remove the Jade Cup from its resting place," the Viper said with obvious disdain. Bian, still shell-shocked from the explosion, started to kick and scream against his overtures. The Viper struck Bian a mighty blow with the back of his hand, sending her crashing violently to the floor. "You and your pathetic band of rejects have caused me nothing but misery from the moment I made your acquaintance. As much as it pains me to say, with the Wraith here, we no longer need your special gifts," the Viper stated and pulled his pistol from its holster, pointing it in her direction. "As they say, your time has run out." Huyn rolled to his side with a noiseless groan and peered through the blood that was running into his eyes. He saw the Viper pointing his pistol at Bian, and despite not hearing the discussion, he knew what the man intended. Finding an inner strength he had never known he possessed, he jumped to his feet and ran with all his might. Withdrawing a heavy dagger as he moved, he swung it in a deadly arc, taking out the guard nearest to him with a blow to the throat. He continued to race in Bian's direction. Another guard caught the movement out of the corner of his eye, but as he turned, he too succumbed to Huyn's fury. The Viper was so intent on his target that he never saw Huyn leap, and as he pulled the trigger, the pirate dived in front of Bian. The bullet that was meant for her hitting him square in the chest. 1 minute she was staring down the barrel of certain death, and the next she was witness to the mortal wounding of her friend. Crying out, she crawled to his side and gently cupped his head in her arms. "Are you okay?" Huyn gasped. Bian looked down at the bloody entry wound, then into his eyes. She started to cry. "Why did you do that?" Bian pleaded. Huyn reached up with a shaky hand and touched her cheek. "Please don't cry. Being with you all has given me a purpose I hadn't felt in years. I would rather die in protection of you than with bloody vengeance in my heart." "Farewell, Princess," Huyn rasped, as the life left his eyes and his hand fell to his side. Bian hugged him as she sobbed. "Don't feel sorry. You'll be joining him any moment now," the Viper stated as he prepared to fire yet again. "Stop!" Tun yelled out as he entered the temple accompanied by guards. The Viper froze and then prepared to pull the trigger regardless. "Don't you dare disobey me!" "We don't need her," the Viper replied. "I hope you're right, but on the off chance the Wraith is unsuccessful, I would rather have a backup," Tun said. The Viper lowered his pistol and looked around. "Where is the Wraith?" he asked. Chapter 40. Plato awoke to find himself being dragged by 3 vanguard soldiers, followed closely by the wraith. "And the spider finally catches her fly," the wraith said, walking casually beside him. Plato wanted to come back with a clever quip, but the best he could manage was a loud groan. "You are quite the adversary. I shall toast your death, in the appropriate manner and time." All Plato could remember was the explosion, falling, then blackness. How long had he been out? Were the others all right? Did they have the cup? Confusion and a dull ache occupied his thoughts. Their worst possible scenario seemed about to happen, and there was nothing he could do about it. A distant crack sounded in the distance. Plato dismissed it, and then one of the vanguard fell over with a sizable hole in his head. 2 more cracks in quick succession, and the other soldiers dropped as well. The wraith spun around and tried to see who and where her assailant was. Plato had a split second to appreciate the irony of her situation before realizing that her attention was now diverted away from him. With her back to Plato, he kicked out and swept her legs away, sending her to the ground, a move which saved her life as a bullet whizzed overhead. Still groggy from his fall, Plato tried to continue his assault, but the wraith was too quick. Jumping to her feet, she disappeared into the vegetation, the unknown sniper's bullets careering into the wall behind. As he struggled to his feet, 2 black-clad figures ran to his side and guided him away into the tree line, the sound of General Toon's soldiers echoing in the distance. Still weak, Plato allowed himself to be guided away. Chapter 41. General Toon and the Viper were overseeing the capture and restraining of Luther and Nhat, who were still groggy from the explosions. The soldiers had managed to tie them up with little resistance when the wraith stormed in. "Ah, where have you been, leaving me to clean up?" the Viper said smugly. "Actually, I just managed to esca—" "You mean you haven't finished off the Englishman?" the Viper interjected. "Actually, the last of my vanguard were just taken out by an unknown party, during which Plato was able to escape," the wraith shot back. General Toon's ears pricked up. "What?" Toon asked. "I was in the process of dragging that white dog in here when a sniper took out 3 of my men. I was lucky." "A sniper bested you?" The Viper laughed out loud. "That's priceless." The wraith whipped her pistol out in one fluid motion and pointed it at the Viper's face. The other soldiers turned and pointed their weapons at her. There was a tense silence. "By your own admission, your vanguard is gone. These troops are loyal to me. You need to remember that." The Viper scoffed. "And what you need to remember is that you were only an officer." "I was a warrior," the wraith stated, and cocked the hammer on her pistol. "Stop it, both of you," General Toon ordered. The wraith lowered her pistol, and the Viper ordered his men to stand down. "If you 2 are finished, we have work to do," Toon said. Chapter 42. "Who the hell are you?" Plato asked. 3 black-clad soldiers had Plato seated by a tree. They were armed, but their weapons weren't trained on him. "I said, who the hell are you?" "Calm yourself," Kylene urged. "We're the cavalry," Malachi added. "And that's supposed to make me feel better?" Plato asked. "No, but it's the truth," Kylene replied. "My friends are in trouble. I don't have time for this," Plato growled as he got to his feet. "Let me guess. You plan on taking out a dozen heavily armed men, as well as 3 of the most dangerous individuals of the U.S. war with nothing more than a dagger and good intentions?" Kylene asked. "Whatever it takes," Plato countered. "Fool. I say we put a bullet." "Malachi." "Enough," Kylene said, and turned his full attention on Plato. "You don't need to know who we are, other than the fact that we're here to help. The guild. You're with the guild of wolves? Plato demanded. If you had an ounce of self-preservation in you, that would be the last time you utter those words. Malachi hissed. We don't have time to explain. Suffice to say we can discuss the fine print, if we succeed, Kylian said. Plato sighed in frustration. All I want to know is, can you help me put these bastards away? Plato asked. That seals today's tale in shadows. We hope Plato Wyngard and the Valley of the Immortals has drawn you deeper into its enigma. Return soon to Crow's Quill's books, where the next chapter awaits, whispering secrets yet untold.